Ever wondered what happens when an entitled HOA tyrant decides your private property is the perfect wedding venue without your permission? This Leavitt daily story of boundary invasion takes, quote, neighborhood drama to a whole new level. The unauthorized wedding. I was elbow deep in cow feed when I first heard her approach, those designer heels clicking across my gravel driveway like Satan's own tap dancer practicing a routine. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound of entitlement approaching at terminal velocity. Karen, my neighborhood's self-appointed HOA queen, strutted through my back gate with all the casual entitlement of someone who'd never had their personal space violated by a federal agent. Which, coincidentally, I used to be. She didn't knock, she didn't call. Hell, she didn't even have the decency to text one of those passive-aggressive "you around" messages before invading. She just marched onto my property like she was conducting a military inspection of territory she'd already conquered. I turned slowly, wiping my calloused hands on my jeans, mentally calculating how many years I'd get for what I was imagining. My autistic son was inside, blissfully unaware that World War Karen was about to erupt in our backyard sanctuary. "Hey there!" she called out with that particular breed of cheerfulness that makes your molars grind involuntarily. Her voice had that sing-song quality that somehow managed to be both condescending and threatening at the same time, a tone I'd previously only heard from particularly creative hostage-takers. "Just letting you know, we'll be using your backyard for my daughter's wedding this Saturday." Not asking. Letting me know. As if my property was some kind of communal resource, like the neighborhood playground, or her husband's rapidly diminishing will to live. The confrontation. I blinked for a full 5 seconds, my brain vapor-locked like an old Chevy on a hot day. Surely the audio processing centers of my brain had malfunctioned. A side effect, perhaps, of too many years listening to Perp's creative interpretations of the truth. "Excuse me," I managed, stepping closer, each footfall leaving a small crater in my gravel driveway. The psychological equivalent of a warning shot. Karen's smile widened to dimensions that would make a great white shark file a copyright claim. "We've decided it's just perfect for the ceremony," she explained, as if addressing a particularly slow toddler. "You have the best view of the sunset in the neighborhood, and we want the pictures to be magical." She fluttered her French manicured fingers dismissively. "I already sent out the invites. Don't worry, we'll be cleaned up by nightfall." She delivered this information with the beatific satisfaction of someone bestowing a papal blessing. Like I should drop to my knees and thank the Almighty that Hurricane Karen had chosen my humble property as ground zero for her daughter's matrimonial extravaganza. My eyes swept across the wide-open space behind my barn, land I'd purchased with actual American currency, land I maintained with sweat and calluses, land I kept clean enough that you could eat off it, though I wouldn't recommend it, given the cow patties. In the far pasture, my Herefords grazed with bovine serenity, completely unaware that their peaceful domain was being mentally rezoned as wedding venue peasant class. "Karen," I said, my voice the calm before a very specific storm, one that the National Weather Service would name "Get the hell off my property. This is my land." Not the HOA part. You can't just hold a wedding here. The invasion begins. That should have been the end of it. Should have been. But in the grand tradition of people who wear entitlement like a designer perfume, Karen had taken my objection as more of a quaint suggestion than an outright refusal. 2 days later, I pulled into my driveway after a morning of errands, picking up groceries, grabbing Noah's prescription, the boring stuff that keeps human beings alive, and found a wedding planner's van parked in my driveway like it was valet service at the Ritz. A small army of people in matching polo shirts were unloading a wedding supply store's entire inventory, folding chairs that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, floral arches dripping with roses that had never known the indignity of growing in actual dirt, and crisp white tablecloths that would surrender to the first hint of barbecue sauce. And, I kid you not, one of those ridiculous Instagram-ready donut walls that serve no purpose except to remind everyone that regular buffet tables aren't cute enough for modern nuptials. My brain short-circuited. I abandoned my truck, keys still dangling in the ignition, and sprinted around back like a man whose pants were on fire. What I saw made my heart rate spike to levels my former FBI fitness instructor would have classified as impending cardiac event. My yard, had been transformed into what can only be described as a Pinterest fever dream made flesh. White chairs arranged in perfect symmetrical rows, all facing west toward the sunset like some kind of cult waiting for the mothership. A carpeted aisle runner stretched from my barn to a wooden altar that had been draped in enough tulle to clothe a small nation of ballerinas. A live band, not a DJ, not a Spotify playlist, a live friggin' band, was testing their sound system right next to my fence, the bassist plucking notes that vibrated through the ground beneath my feet. My property. My private property. The land I paid actual American dollars for. The sanctuary I'd built for Noah away from the noise and chaos of the world. It was being treated like a discount wedding venue that came with the bonus feature of not requiring permission or payment. In my former life as a federal agent, I'd faced down armed suspects with more composure than I felt in that moment. But this was a breach of boundaries so profound it felt like a personal assault with a white satin glove. Confrontation. Round 2. I let out a bellow that would have made a drill sergeant proud. The wedding planner, a woman who'd clearly graduated summa cum laude from the School of Organizational Clipboards, came jogging over with the kind of peppy efficiency that makes you wonder if she bathes in espresso. "Hi there," she beamed with customer service brightness. "Are you with the bride or groom? I don't have you on my check-in list." "I'm with the deed," I replied flatly. "As in, the one that says I own this property." Her smile evaporated faster than spilled beer on hot asphalt. "Wait, you're not Karen's brother or something? Do I look like I share DNA with a woman who thinks property lines are optional?" But she said this was her family's farm." The clipboard drooped in her hands like a wilting flower. I would have laughed if my blood pressure wasn't reaching levels that would concern medical professionals. Karen had promoted herself from neighbor to blood relative in the span of 48 hours, a genealogical miracle worthy of its own TED Talk. "Everyone needs to pack up and get out," I said, each word crisp and deliberate. "Now. Immediately. Yesterday." The planner scrambled away like I'd announced the property was actually a testing site for experimental explosives. Phone calls were made. Whispers spread. The wedding machine ground to a confused halt. 20 minutes later, 20 minutes during which I stood guard like a territorial goose with anger management issues, Karen's SUV came roaring up my driveway. She emerged in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, wearing the kind of confidence only achieved through a lifetime of never hearing the word no. "Oh, come on," she groaned, approaching me with arms outstretched like we were old college buddies having a silly misunderstanding. "You're really gonna ruin my daughter's special day over a technicality?" A technicality. That's what she called my property rights. Like I was being pedantic about the fine print on a coupon. "We're already set up," she continued, gesturing to my hijacked yard like it was evidence in her favor. "Just let it happen, and we'll be gone by nightfall. I promise." She smiled. That patronizing smile people give when they think you're being unreasonable about something completely reasonable, like not wanting strangers to commandeer your land for a Pinterest-powered matrimonial circus. I realized then that Karen didn't just want to use my yard. She wanted me to feel bad for having the audacity to object. In that moment, I understood why some animals eat their young. The standoff. I fixed Karen with my best federal agent who's seen some shit stare and said maybe you should have dreamed of asking permission first. Permission? That magical concept taught in preschool right after sharing and not eating crayons, yet somehow Karen had managed to miss that lesson entirely. The concept seemed as foreign to her as quantum physics would be to a housefly. Eventually they left, but calling their departure quiet would be like calling a tornado a gentle breeze. Karen stormed out like a villain in a soap opera, muttering an impressive catalog of threats that included lawsuits, HOA retaliation, and how, quote, everyone in the neighborhood would hear about this betrayal. I didn't care. Standing in my once again peaceful yard, I thought I'd made my point, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer meeting a watermelon. Message received. Case closed. That is, until I woke up the next morning. The escalation. I shuffled outside in my bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, ready to enjoy the kind of silence you can only get when entitled neighbors aren't turning your property into a matrimonial theme park. Instead, I found all the decorations back in place, everything. Every last tool bow, fairy light, and rustic wooden sign featuring inspirational calligraphy had been reset overnight like some kind of wedding-themed horror movie. Even worse, They'd zip-tied some of the decor to my fence posts. Zip ties. The universal symbol of, we really don't want you removing this. My son would spend hours fixating on those zip ties if I didn't get them off before he noticed. His mind caught in the endless loop of patterns they created. And then I saw it, a note taped to my barn door, written in the kind of flowery handwriting that probably took years of practice and a collection of special pens. It read, "Thanks again for being a team player. Please avoid the area Saturday from 4 to 9 p.m. to give guests privacy. We appreciate your contribution. Team player." As if we were colleagues in an office who'd agreed to split the cost of a birthday cake, not a property owner being colonized by the wedding industrial complex. I stood there, coffee going cold in my hand, wondering if I was having a stroke or if the universe really did have this bizarre sense of humor. In my years with the feds, I'd confronted drug lords with more respect for boundaries than Karen from next door, declaring war. My hands were shaking so hard the note crinkled like autumn leaves. Karen hadn't just crossed a line. She'd obliterated it, tap-danced on its grave, and erected a wedding arch in its place. This wasn't trespassing anymore. This was a full-blown declaration of war, a suburban Normandy invasion equipped with donut walls instead of artillery. I called Mike, our actual HOA president, a reasonable human being who, unlike Karen, didn't believe the world was his personal IKEA showroom. Mike's the kind of guy who'd apologize to a chair after bumping into it. "Wait," he sputtered after I explained the situation. "What?" She said, "What?" When I told him about Karen's imaginary HOA rule requiring me to share my land for community events, he practically choked. "No, man, that's all completely bogus. There's no such rule. You're not required to share your land. We'd never approve something like that." Mike promised to talk to her, but we both knew it was like trying to reason with a hurricane. Karen didn't follow rules. She invented them out of thin air and then dared you to prove they didn't exist. In my federal days, I'd met cartel enforcers with more respect for bureaucratic procedure. That evening, I stood on my porch surveying the wedding wonderland that had metastasized across my property. Fairy lights strangled my oak trees like luminous pythons. Tables for 100 people were arranged in a pattern that would make a geometry teacher weep with joy. And there, glowing in the twilight like some kind of pastry-based religious shrine, stood the infamous donut wall, its glazed inhabitants blissfully unaware of the drama they'd fallen into. Then I spotted my cows gathered at the fence line, watching the transformation of their peaceful home with what I could only describe as bovine bewilderment. Gentle creatures with exactly zero interest in being wedding backdrop accessories, they chewed their cud thoughtfully, as if to say, "Hey boss, what's with the tool invasion?" That's when inspiration struck me like a bolt of petty lightning. If Karen was determined to throw a wedding on my land without permission, I was equally determined to ensure it would be a ceremony that would live in local legend for generations to come, not as the picture-perfect fantasy she'd envisioned, but as the cautionary tale mothers would whisper to their entitled children at night. "See, honey, this is why we always ask permission before using other people's things." I looked at my cows again and smiled. They had no idea they were about to become the main characters in Karen's perfect wedding. The director's cut. The wedding day arrives. By mid-afternoon, the invasion was in full swing. Fancy cars, the kind that cost more than my first house, lined our narrow country road like some kind of impromptu luxury dealership. Guests in designer suits and dresses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage strolled past my gate with the casual entitlement of people who've never been told no in their lives. And then there was Karen, commander-in-chief of this hostile takeover, strutting across my land in a glittering rose-gold dress that made her look like a disco ball with megalomania. She was grinning ear to ear, like she'd just conquered Rome without a single soldier. Caesar had nothing on Karen's imperial ambitions. She spotted me leaning against my barn door, probably ruining her wedding aesthetic with my decidedly un-Pinterest-worthy flannel and boots, and raised her champagne glass in my direction. It was the fakest, most condescending toast in human history. "Hope you're enjoying the show," she called out, voice dripping with that smug satisfaction unique to people who think they've won something when they've actually just committed a crime. I didn't reply. Not with words, anyway. I simply smiled, the kind of smile that would have made my federal colleagues reach for their sidearms, tipped my hat like a gentleman rancher, and walked back inside. The barn door creaked closed behind me with satisfying drama. Behind that smile was the knowledge that Karen had scripted an elegant garden wedding, but had no idea she was about to star in a completely different production. One with significantly more livestock participation, the main event. At exactly 5:57 p.m., the music shifted from whatever generic playlist they'd been using to something with actual taste. The soft strumming of a guitar floated through the air like a well-trained reconnaissance team infiltrating enemy territory. All around my property, strangers in clothes worth more than my truck settled into chairs they had no right to sit in. The aisle, my cowpath essentially, had been cleared of nature's little surprises. I'd been tempted to leave them, but even I have standards for biological warfare. The bridesmaids, a color-coordinated militia in matching peach dresses, stood to the side looking simultaneously bored and superior. That special expression reserved for people who think standing next to someone important makes them important. And then there was Karen. She clapped her hands like she was summoning a servant, motioning imperiously for silence across land that had my name on the deed. The sun had just begun its descent behind the trees, casting a golden glow over the entire setup, Mother Nature's final gift to this circus of entitlement. It was cinematically perfect, exactly the Instagram moment she'd been engineering since violating my property line. It was, in short, exactly the moment she'd been building toward. And that's when I moved. Because timing, as anyone who's ever conducted a raid knows, is everything. Bovine justice. The sheriff had arrived just moments earlier and was now standing beside me, arms crossed, watching the madness unfold with a look that bordered on professional amusement. The kind of expression law enforcement develops after decades of seeing humanity's finest moments of stupidity. He didn't even need to ask what was happening. It was all gloriously self-explanatory: the decorations, the guests, the flagrant trespassing, and, of course, my bovine enforcement squad doing what cows naturally do when presented with pristine white chairs and peach tablecloths. It was, in every sense, a complete and glorious mess. The kind that makes you wish you'd invested in a decent camera setup. "Officer!" Karen ran up to him, waving her arms like she was trying to guide a Boeing 747 to an emergency landing on my pasture. Her voice hit that special pitch that makes dogs howl 3 counties over. This man, this monster, intentionally released these beasts to destroy my daughter's special day. She was on a roll now, a Category 5 hurricane of accusations: property destruction, hers, not mine, somehow; animal negligence, rich, coming from someone who couldn't tell a cow from a lawnmower; and, my personal favorite, emotional trauma. Apparently watching entitled people face consequences is now a DSM-listed condition. The sheriff, God bless his poker face, calmly looked at her, then at me, then back at the wedding scene where one of my more artistically inclined Herefords was currently redecorating a gift table. His expression said everything his professional ethics prevented him from verbalizing: I don't get paid enough for this particular brand of suburban drama. Aftermath and viral fame. The next morning I woke up to the gentle symphony of bovine snorts outside my window and the considerably less gentle nuclear meltdown of my phone. The damn thing was vibrating itself toward oblivion with notifications. Turns out, our little property rights lesson had gone what the kids call viral overnight. I squinted at the screen, coffee not yet touching my federal agent-turned-cow farmer brain, to see that someone, probably one of Karen's traumatized guests with excellent cinematography skills, had captured Daisy's grand entrance. The first video showed my prize Hereford interrupting the wedding vows with the timing of a Broadway veteran, standing dead center in front of the altar like she owned the place. She had somehow acquired a floral garland that hung majestically from her horns, making her look like she was the maid of honor who'd had enough of this backyard bullshit. Jim, my son, was already up and flapping his hands with excitement as he watched the replay on his tablet. For a kid who doesn't typically enjoy social chaos, he seemed particularly delighted by Daisy's wedding crasher debut. There's something universally satisfying about watching entitled people get their comeuppance via livestock, I suppose, even to an autistic 12-year-old who normally prefers the orderly world of train schedules and planetary orbits. "Dad, Daisy's famous," he announced, showing me a counter that had already hit 6 figures. "The internet says she's an icon, my cow, for destroying a wedding that shouldn't have existed on my property in the first place. Sometimes I wonder if leaving the FBI for this peaceful country life was really the stress reduction my therapist promised. At least when criminals shot at me, they didn't try to send me invoices for their bullets afterward. Sometimes the most satisfying justice comes with 4 legs and a moo." If you've ever dealt with entitled neighbors or HOA nightmares, share your story in the comments below and subscribe to Leavitt Daily for more tales of sweet, satisfying comeuppance that prove no one is above the law. not even Karen.